I'd also like to include the advice that having no agent at all is better than having. I personally chose to pursue traditional publishing, and I did this for a few different reasons. To be completely honest, my expectation versus the reality of getting a book deal.
Alex Kennington is an author of both fantasy and science fiction novels, but today we'll be discussing her debut Romantasy novel, as well as how she got her six-figure book deal. And Alex will also be giving some advice for aspiring authors who are hoping to follow a similar path. For me personally, one of the things I enjoyed most was her thoughts on why this romantasy genre seems to be exploding and taking over the internet at the moment. But I also enjoyed how she described what her dream day of writing looks like in comparison to what an actual day of writing looks like, because I think if we're all honest, we'd all like to write more than we're capable of writing, and just to see how somebody who has a six-figure book deal has to still fit in writing was not only relatable, but also encouraging. But I think this is enough of an intro. Let me introduce you to Alex. Alex, I can't tell you how many people I know who have an idea to write a book, but moving from that space from idea to actually sitting down and facing the blank page is quite tricky. So how did you go about sitting down to actually write your first book? And has this process always come naturally to you?
I've actually been writing stories since I was a kid. I have long dreamed of being an author. I think I was probably about 12 when I decided that becoming an author was something that I wanted for myself. And I tried writing a bunch of different stories while I was in high school and grade school, and nothing really kind of came together enough to be a full novel. It wasn't until I was in college that I actually completed my first manuscript, and that is the manuscript that I actually have coming out as my debut novel. It looks a lot different now than it did when I first wrote it, but really what helped me be able to sit down and actually hammer it out, there were a few things. The first was that I participated in a challenge to write a 50,000 word novel in 30 days. It was a challenge that I did with my writers group, so I had people there to help hold me accountable and to help me keep track of pursuing my goals. I tried to set goals that were realistic for the time that I had. So 50,000 words was a lot, but I also knew that the classes that I was taking in college at the time, they left me with a lot of free time to actually pursue that writing. I tried to make sure that the goals that I was setting for myself were not too far from what I was actually capable of accomplishing. From there, probably the best thing that helped me the most was actually sitting down to outline the novel before I started writing it. Some people like to outline, others are not so fond of it. I had sort of outlined before in the past, but this was the most comprehensive outline I had ever written, and knowing exactly where my story was going was probably the thing that helped me the most in being able to actually get it down on paper. When there were times that I was not sure whether or not I was going to be able to push through, knowing that exciting things were coming in the following pages was enough to help motivate me. It took a ton of hard work and a lot of discipline, and really I had to kind of take upon myself a challenge to learn about writing craft as a whole. Reading was a great background for me. It really helped me to internalize a lot of what a story should feel like. But then when it came down to actually writing it and what it should look like, I really had to pick up some craft books and just dive into studying how to write and how to actually put that together. It was a combination of all these things that really helped me be able to sit down and actually type out all the words.
Thanks for walking us through how you got your book together. But I know I'm not the only one who's curious about the next phase. So you finished your book and now you got to the point where you needed to decide which publishing route you were going to take. Are you just able to simplify the publishing journey for people who haven't even thought about it yet? That would be amazing.
Once a person has written a book, deciding whether to self-publish it or try to traditionally publish it can be a very complicated question. I personally chose to pursue traditional publishing, and I did this for a few different reasons. The first being my time. So while traditional publishing is a process that can take a very long time and can come with a lot of rejections, self-publishing means that you are doing a lot of things yourself that if you were to pursue traditional publishing, someone else would do for you. So I really valued the idea of being able to sit back and just be the author and not have to look into finding an editor, look into finding a cover designer, look into how to do my marketing best. I wanted to be able to focus in on the writing without having to wear all the different hats. So time was really the first thing that kind of helped me decide that traditional publishing was a route I wanted to take. The second thing that kind of came into play was money. So when I finished this book, when I decided I wanted to pursue publication for it, I was a recently graduated college student. I was not not rich in funding in any way. When you graduate college, at least for me, I was barely making it financially. So the idea of needing to pay for services to help make my book the best it could be, that just was not a possibility for me. And while, yes, you can do things cheaply as a self-published author, I really wanted to make sure that my book was becoming the best it could be. When you pursue traditional publishing, you don't have to pay for those services. Your publisher actually pays you in advance, that you get that money without having to do anything else. So you get that advance, and then they will pay for editing. They will pay for cover design, they will pay for marketing, and while it's not always the most ideal scenario for everyone, that was something that really made it appealing to me. The last thing that helped me choose traditional publishing is distribution. So as a self-published author, you are able to sell your books as widely as you can. But when you're traditionally published, one of the benefits of having a huge corporation behind you, a publisher, is that they can get your book into a lot of places that self-published authors might not be able to. It's often hard for self-published authors to get their books in places like Barnes & Noble because it really just depends on whether or not the local stores are willing to carry those titles. Whereas with a traditional publisher, you are a lot more likely to see your book physically on those shelves. Overall, there were a lot of different reasons that contributed to my desire to choose traditional publishing, but while it was tough, I will say that I don't regret it at all. It took a really long time, but I think that ultimately traditional publishing was right for me, and I feel very happy with the way that I chose to pursue publishing. I also have a ton of friends who are self-published authors, and I am absolutely in awe of the things that they accomplish. They do so much hard work to create these beautiful novels that change people's lives. So regardless, whatever route someone is considering, as long as they do their research and do what feels best for them, I think that's the most important thing.
Okay, cool. So could you walk us through your querying process? What was it like finding an agent? And do you have any tips for people who are going about the querying process for their first time?
My experience with querying and trying to find a literary agent was about what most people's looks like. I put together a query letter and a submission package that involved a synopsis of everything that happened in my book. And then I think the sample pages that were usually asked for were the first 10 or so. So I took the first 10 pages of my novel and I started submitting them, and I started throwing them out there to all these literary agents. I remember being really excited and really hopeful, and that didn't last for super long. There is a lot of rejection when you are querying.
Would you be open to just painting a picture of what experiencing all this rejection was really like?
I think that rejection was something that, while I knew it was coming, it still took me by surprise how much it impacted me emotionally. Rejection for your creative work can be really tough. When you do creative things like writing a book, it can often feel like a rejection for a business reason is actually a rejection of you and your work as a whole. That's not always the case, and I hope that as people query, that's something that they will learn for themselves as well.
So remind me, how long did you query for again?
I ultimately ended up querying for 9 months. I queried the book that will be my debut, and then towards the tail end, when I had about run out of agents to submit to, I had started querying a different book as well. It was at the 9-month mark that I received an offer from my agent now to represent me. She had read my fantasy novel and was really interested in sending it out to big publishers on my behalf. So we hopped on a phone call and we chatted, and I had a really, really good feeling about her. I asked a lot of questions. Not enough of the right ones, I don't think, because I was new and I was learning, but I felt good enough about her to move forward.
Okay, so what would you say we should be looking for specifically during this querying process?
Ultimately, I think querying is about finding the best advocate for you and your work. There are a lot of agents out there. There are a lot of people querying their novels, a lot of people going for those dreams of traditional publication, and all of the rejection, all of that comes with it, it's just part and parcel. And if you can find the best advocate for your work, then that's what ultimately matters.
So, do you have any advice for any first-time querying authors?
My advice for querying authors would be to not give up. It will seem hard. It will feel probably very painful in some ways, but keep writing that next book. Keep working and keep pursuing your dreams. Decide what you want and go for it. I'd also say that if querying one manuscript doesn't work out, try again with another one. There are many people who have to query multiple manuscripts before they end up finding an agent. I'd also encourage you to remember that these stories people have where they find an agent over the course of a 5-day period, those are the exception and not the rule. Most people spend months, if not years, looking for the right literary agent. And if you feel like your journey is going slower than someone else's, take a step back, take a deep breath, and know that that's what's normal. I'd also like to include the advice that having no agent at all is better than having a bad agent. I say this because anyone can put the title literary agent in their profile. Anyone can claim to accept submissions from authors, but not everyone has the right experience to do you and your manuscript right. So you need to make sure that you're doing research. You need to make sure that even if an agent is qualified, that you feel good about them too as a business partner, because this is someone that you're trusting your creative work with and your future writing career. So do not make that decision lightly if you do receive an offer of representation.
Thanks, Alex. That was a lot of great advice. I know I got a lot from that, and I'm sure people watching this also took some notes. I am very curious about your book deal, though. I think when I first came across your content and read that you got a 6-figure book deal, it just really blew my mind and gave me a lot of hope that, maybe one day I could achieve something similar. But I am curious, was there an expectation gap? Like, was the expectation of what a book deal would be like, did it meet the reality of it? So could you just walk us through a bit of your experience with regards to getting a book deal?
To be completely honest, my expectation versus the reality of getting a book deal, I don't know that it looked too terribly different. I tried really hard to go into the process of being on submission to editors with an open mind and no expectations. Obviously, that's not a perfect answer. I hoped that I would get a deal quickly because sometimes that does happen. That was not the case for me. I spent over a year on submission to editors with my manuscript. So by that point, I had secured a literary agent, and then it took us a year of submitting to publishers before I received an offer. That was a little bit tough. I think I underestimated also how deeply the rejections from editors would hit as well. I thought that I had really built up a tough skin after receiving so many rejections while querying. But the rejections from editors also still felt very painful, and that surprised me a lot. I think one other thing that surprised me too was how little I realized I truly knew when the offer did come in. And I think in some ways it may have prevented me from being able to advocate for myself in the best way possible.
What do you mean by that?
I think ultimately, I wish that I had tried to talk more with people who had received book deals, ask about their experiences, and see exactly what it was like for them, and understand what I needed to be asking for and expecting versus what was being offered to me, if that makes sense. I feel very lucky that I received an absolutely incredible book deal with a publisher who I genuinely enjoy working with. My editor is a dream. But still looking back, I think, oh my gosh, wow, like I could easily have stumbled into something that was not good for me and I wouldn't even have known. So I think ultimately, if I could go back, I would do a lot more of the research on that level. However, I will say the reality of having a book deal and being a published author, it's incredible. I have dreamed of this for a very long time, and knowing that in just a few short days I will be able to go to a bookstore and find my own work on the shelf is absolutely incredible to me. It feels just as good as I've imagined over all of these years. I think part of that comes from the fact that I am working with an editor that I really love, who advocates for me, and that things really did work out in the best way they could.
It's really cool to hear. Thanks for sharing that. If you could go back in time though and give an earlier version of yourself advice, maybe before all of this started, what would you say?
I think if I could go back in time and talk to a younger version of myself who was just starting to write, who was finally sitting down to write this book idea that she had that she was determined to finish, I would tell myself a few different things. The first is to not stop writing, to not let go of the spark that makes this thing so enjoyable. I had always loved it, and I think somewhere along the way, it can be difficult to keep the enjoyment and the business part of things separate. And as those merged, I don't think I necessarily lost the enjoyment for it, but I really wish I had leaned into the passion of it all as much as I could have. I would also tell myself that it's going to take a lot of hard work. I think that there is no way to possibly underestimate how much work goes into publishing a novel and even finishing the first draft of a novel. It's hard, and anyone who has done that is incredible. It's a process that takes a lot of time, and truly, I would not change anything for the world. I would also tell myself too to just, again, remember to love the process and to find the parts of it that make it so joyful and to really lean into those.
Okay, so your debut novel is a romantasy novel, if I'm correct. And from what I've seen, Romantasy is just taking over the internet. And I've never read a romantasy novel. I'm open to it, but I just don't understand anything about the genre. So could you explain to all of us newbies what Romantasy is and maybe why you think it's taking over?
You are absolutely right that Romantasy is a current fan favorite of people who read. I think of books like A Court of Thorns and Roses and how big that blew up on the internet. It's kind of incredible. Romantasy is a term that's constantly evolving. I don't think that anyone has managed to really nail down the perfect definition that exactly encompasses what everyone thinks of when they think romantasy. For me, when I think of romantasy, I think of books that are mainly based in fantasy, but that have a romance arc that is equally important. I tend to ask myself, if I took the romance out of this book, would the plot stay the same? If the answer is no, that would change the plot fundamentally, then I like to think of it as romantasy.
Okay, but Alex, why do you think it's exploded?
I don't know that there's necessarily a super great reason as to why this has exploded so much, why the romantasy genre is so popular. I do have some theories though. I think part of it is because a lot of the adults who are now reading romantasy are people who grew up reading young adult books that kind of fell along those same lines. They were fantasy books with beautiful and intricate world building that had a little bit of teenage appropriate romance in them. My guess is that a lot of the people who read those books grew up and wanted more of the romance to go with the fantasy and who wanted to combine those two things that they loved in such a great way. I think too that a lot of these romantasy books, the ones that tend to be in the new adult genre or, characters who are anywhere from 18 or 19 to probably 24, 25, characters in that age range, I feel like a lot of the people who are reading those books are reading them because these older characters are still having coming of age experiences. I know that, at least for me personally, a lot of the coming of age things that most people associate with being in high school were things that I didn't really experience myself until I was in college or my early 20s. And so reading books where that was the case for these heroines also, I think I really loved that too. It was exactly what I was searching for, but it had the element usually of a little bit more romance, a little bit more heat to that romance sometimes that I felt I had been missing in young adult because now I was a person who had matured. I was ready for more things in my fiction, and Romantasy really delivered that.
Okay, Alex, fun question. Could you explain what your ideal day of writing would look like? And then could you give us a look inside what an actual day of writing looks like in your case?
I think in my dream world, my ideal day of writing looks like waking up when I happen to wake up, taking some time to eat and get ready, and then having the clarity and peace of mind to jump into my writing and to write until I get to what feels like a good stopping point. Take a little bit of a break, work on some other things, maybe some admin, maybe do some reading to help kind of refill my creative well, spend some time with my spouse and my child, and then come down for another writing session of a couple of hours. I think in the end, the perfect writing day to me looks like having enough time to get in all the writing that I want to do and knowing in a perfect world that if I don't get everything done that I absolutely feel like I have to in one sitting, that there will be more time to work on it and to get my heart into it later. My actual writing days look significantly different. I work a full-time job, so that obviously takes precedence for me. And then I'm also a mom, as I've mentioned, so spending time with my 4-year-old is something that I really try to prioritize. Ideally, when I am on deadline, so I have a deadline, I have something due by a specific date that I have to have finished, I like to employ a few different strategies. I am lucky enough to work a remote job, so I work from home. I don't have a commute to or from work, so if I'm on deadline, I'll often come down to my office 30 minutes, 20 minutes before my workday starts and get in some writing then. I like to make ample use of my lunch break as time for writing, and I also like to take 15 to 20-minute breaks throughout my day as I complete all of my 9 to 5 day job work to get in a few words here and there. Once that's complete, I often spend my evenings writing after my son goes to bed. And then weekends, I'll usually do my best to, on Saturdays and Sundays, go to a coffee shop or go to the library and try to get some quiet writing time in for 3 or 4 hours. Having that time to really just sit there and absorb myself in my story is super helpful for me. So that's what my typical writing schedule looks like, especially when I'm on deadline. When I'm not on deadline, I tend to be a little bit more relaxed about how much writing I'm actually getting down every day. But it's still, I think, very important to me that I have my hands in my story in some way every day. Otherwise, I tend to lose momentum and it becomes harder to pick up the pace again when I'm ready to start writing once more.
Wow, I can totally relate to your dream day of writing where you always have time to come back to something. I think that's something I long for, and I'm sure a lot of other aspiring authors also wish they just had more time to write. So yeah, I definitely, or in my dream day of writing, like it would look very similar. Talking about writing, what would you say is something that you love most about writing? And is there anything you hate about writing?
I genuinely love writing so much. Every part of the process just brings me so much joy. I think if there was one thing that I had to say I hated about writing, it would be how time consuming it can be to get a whole entire book finished in a way that feels good. There's no such thing as a perfect book, but even getting a book to a good enough point that I feel confident putting it out in the world, it takes a long, long time. And I have to read that book over and over and over again to the point where eventually my words just feel like they're kind of meaningless and I know every plot twist already and I know exactly what the characters are doing and why. And I start to lose a little bit of the magic near the end. It feels a lot more like a chore than like living a dream come true. So probably just the amount of time that I have to spend doing some of the tedious work might be the one thing that I think is kind of a downside about writing. But in the end, I think it's more than worth it to push through all of that because I think about when it comes to writing, I just think about the joy of knowing that I have created something that will touch people. That was really what appealed to me that made me want to start writing in the first place. I was an avid reader growing up, and there was nothing that I loved more than reading a book that made me feel something, which was every book, I think, in some way. And that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to write words that made people feel something. And so that's what keeps me going on the hard days and during the tedious moments is looking at my own words on the page and thinking, they might not be perfect now, but one day these words will play like a movie in someone's head. And one day these words will make someone feel something without me even needing to be physically present to say the words aloud.
Okay, Alex, I'm dying to know about your book now. Would you be open to sharing a little bit about your book? And then would you also be open to recommending maybe 1, 2, or 3 romantasy novels that people can check out if they've never explored the genre before?
I would love to tell you all about my debut novel. This is Blood Beneath the Snow. It is a new adult romantasy book that is about a princess who has no magic. She lives, though, in a world where having magic is incredibly important to all the people around her, and they see her as less than because she does not have magic. She has these really close friends who also don't have magic, and when their lives are put on the line, she knows that what she has to do to save them is enter the competition between her brothers, the other royal children, in order to fight for the death to try and win the crown. She knows that if she is queen, then she has the power to save her friends. The only problem is that her older brothers do have magic, and it's incredibly powerful, incredibly strong. She has no abilities, but she's determined to do this anyway. After she decides to enter this competition, though, she's actually kidnapped by a masked, mysterious enemy general. Her country is fighting a war, and he is leading the charge on against them. He kidnaps her, and she is ready to let him have it. And then she discovers that he has actually kidnapped her because he wants to train her to win this competition. There's enemies to lovers, there's only one bed, there's forced proximity, there's political intrigue, and yes, there is spice. I love this book. My hope is that if you are a romantasy reader that you will pick it up because I think you will love it too. And yeah, I put a lot of hard work into it, so if you do check it out, let me know what you think. Unless you hate it, then don't tell me what you think. If you are a fellow Romantasy fan and you are looking for some other book recommendations, I absolutely have them for you. I have 3 right here with me. The first is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This is what I would call a horror romantasy. So there are elements of horror within it. It's about this woman who is, I think she's a witch. Yeah, but she enters a haunted house to try and figure out how to save her sister. There's a competition happening in this haunted house, and so she goes in and ends up meeting this ghost who is going to potentially help her win if she helps him too. So this one is spicy, it's fun, I devoured this book. It was so good. Another one I'd recommend if you want to binge read a completed series is Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha J. Tooley. This book is fabulous. It's basically like The Bachelor meets The Hunger Games. So essentially, there is this woman, her name is Lore, and she finds herself in this competition to try and win the hand of this Fae prince. So she is trying to do her best to win, but these trials are deadly, and it turns into more than just a simple competition for someone's hand in the end. There are 4 books in this series. Each of them is better than the last somehow, and this one is incredible too. So I highly recommend you pick it up. And then last but not least, I always recommend The Hurricane Wars. This is a fancy version, so the cover doesn't always look like this. But The Hurricane Wars is about 2 people who are on opposite sides of the war who end up in a marriage of convenience and must put their woes and their hatred of each other aside in order to save both of their peoples. But They don't really like each other. They are very begrudgingly attracted to each other. They both have, she has light magic, he has dark magic. The banter in this is just, it's to die for. So I really hope you'll check this one out.
Thanks, Alex. A huge thank you to Alex for taking out the time to answer those questions. I just find myself so grateful that I am being able to speak to these authors who are doing something that I so hope to do one day. And I hope you're getting as much value from these conversations as I'm getting. And I'll make sure to link Alex's information in the description below. I know she's got a website. I know that she's got some social media as well, so you can check out the description for all of that. And I know she's also doing some book signings. So if you want to get Alex's book and you're in the area, just check out her website for more information on that. But I can't wait to read her book. It's hopefully going to be the first Romantasy book that I'm going to read. And then I'm also keen to check out some of her recommendations as well and get an intro to this Romantasy genre that everybody seems to be loving right now. So I'm really looking forward to that. But thanks for spending your time with me, and I'll see you in a future video. Take care, guys. Bye.